Welcome all to the Central Asia Program seminars. My name is Sébastien Pérouse. I'm the director of the Central Asia Program here at the IRIS at George Washington University. So today I'm very happy to welcome you to this important event on cross-border relations between Central Asia and Afghanistan in the Taliban era. I want to specify that this event is co-sponsored by the Kennan Institute at the Woodrow Wilson Center. So I would like really to thank the Institute and especially Victoria Pardini and William Pomerantz for their support to organize this event. So today we're going to delve into the complex and evolving dynamics that have emerged in the border regions of Central Asia and Afghanistan against, of course, the backdrop of the Taliban's resurgence and the implications it carries for security, for politics, for economics, and for society. And for a long time, I guess, 2 decades, the border areas between the Central Asian states and Afghanistan have been portrayed as a region susceptible to violence and to instability. And of course, the return to power of the Taliban 2 years ago has raised even more concerns about the security situation in these areas. On the other hand, the borders with Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan have, for the most part, experienced in a way fewer conflicts than border of Afghanistan with other countries. So in today's seminar, we will explore the intricate cross-border dynamics between Central Asia and Afghanistan. For that, we have a panel of very well-known experts with Dr. Mélanie Sadozay, with Mr. Nader Naderi, and with Mr. Barmak Pajwak, who, the 3 of them are going to share the insights, their analysis on this critical topic, with maybe the aim, to foster a deeper understanding of the region, and more importantly, to explore how cooperation and stability can be fostered in these challenging times. So each presenter will speak about 15 minutes. Then we will have a Q&A session. So please send me your questions in the chat box. So thank you all for your participation today. And we are going to start with Dr. Mélanie Sadozay, who is a postdoctoral fellow at the IRIS. So, with us, and I must say that we're very proud to have her at the IRIS. So Mélanie's research and publications are based on ethnographic methods. She has conducted an extensive field work for many years, for almost 10 years now, with a focus on cross-border relations in remote areas of Afghanistan and Tajikistan in the Pamir Mountains. And the research interests include everyday life along the border, remoteness, and connectivity in high mountain regions, relations between the Taliban and other Central Asian governments, and the geographic history of the border and the Pamirs. And Mélanie has published many papers, many academic articles, including in the Journal of Borderland Studies, in Problems of Post-Communism, and in the Journal of Power Institutions of Post-Soviet Societies. Mélanie, thank you so much for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
All right. So I will... Okay, so yeah, thank you so much for putting this together. And like Sébastien said, I will bring a bottom-up approach, a more fieldwork-oriented approach to the topic, based on my PhD and postdoc research along the border between Tajikistan and Afghanistan, and more recently between Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. And the main idea here is that there's, like Sébastien said, there's a paradox of seeing Afghanistan as a zone of danger and violence spreading all over Central Asia. However, there are connectivity dynamics and contacts when we look at what's going on along the common borders at the level of these borders themselves. So I will bring a bottom-up approach that will, of course, be complemented by the analysis of my two co-panelists. And I will not repeat what Sebastian said about my research, but it's really ethnographic oriented, like I said. I will, however, only focus on the border between Tajikistan and Afghanistan and Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. The border with Turkmenistan is really hard to study because of a lack of access due to restrictions on foreigners and the lack of reliable data. Most of the data we have come from Afghanistan, and we don't have enough from Turkmenistan. But again, I think my co-panelists can have a better knowledge of the situation there, so I will leave that for them. Before starting talking about the Taliban era since the summer of 2021, I wanted to get back to what happened to the situation before. So here you have an example of the cross-border activity, a map of the cross-border activities between Tajikistan and Afghanistan before the border was closed in February 2022. So that was before the Taliban arrived, and the border was closed in the context of the COVID pandemic. So this map shows the situation between the beginning of the 2020 of a myriad of activities going on between Afghanistan and Tajikistan when several international organizations stepped in to try and develop those border remote areas and to connect the two sides. The biggest one being the Agahan Development Network, which is an international development organization. And you can see just by looking at this map that it was a very connected border, and like what we think, where people-to-people contact took place on cross-border markets, on bridges that Tajikistani and Afghan citizens could cross. There were also medical programs, so Afghans namely could cross the border into Tajikistan to get access to healthcare, but Tajikistani healthcare workers could also cross into Afghanistan to help Afghan communities. There were also irrigation pipelines. There are still irrigation pipelines on the western part of this border area, which is actually only the part in Badakhshan. So I'm only looking at this. I don't know if you can see on this tiny map, this one part. So I'm not looking at the western side, which is different, but I can talk about that in the Q&A if you want. All of that is to say that to use the typology made by Oscar Martinez, who's a border studies scholar, it was an interdependent borderlands, which means that stability prevailed and communities could carry on friendly and cooperative relationships. But that is not the case anymore. Because in June and July 2021, so before the Taliban arrived in Kabul, they had already taken control of the cross-border districts between Afghanistan and Tajikistan and Afghanistan and Uzbekistan. You can see here on this picture that this picture was taken in July 2021, and they had already put their flag on one of the cross-border bridges between Afghanistan and Tajikistan. And that's very important because ever since the Taliban are in control of the border districts, the governance of the border has changed, and it's a big change because it conditions the cross-border practices between Afghanistan and Tajikistan, Afghanistan and Uzbekistan, of course. So now we don't observe an interdependent borderlands. Like I said, it's almost an alienated borderlands, which means that there's little relation going on both sides. So now let's move on to what has really changed since June and July 2021. So we'll start with Tajikistan's official position on the Taliban being in power. Officially, Tajikistan doesn't have any contact with the Taliban, and the criteria for them to recognize or at least to engage with the Taliban are that they should have an inclusive government and secure women and girls' rights. And I'm sure my co-panelists can talk more about that, because we have seen reports of actual engagement between the government of Tajikistan and the Taliban, but it's not public. The border is closed, so that's something I was saying before. And also we witnessed security reinforcement on the Tajikistan side, with new border posts being constructed, being built. And also the border has been advanced on the western side of the border here. So the official border line is the one that you see that is drawn here. But the military outposts in Tajikistan were not literally at the border, they were further inland. And very recently, they have moved closer to the border. So now they're only 2 kilometers away from the official border line. So there's definitely a security reinforcement. However, that being said, since September 2023, so that means since it's been a few weeks since there has been a slight shift in Tajikistan's position, the cross-border markets in Badakhshan, so in this region, have reopened at the beginning of September 2023. And now Tajikistan officially acknowledges that there are economic ties with Afghanistan, but that the political position of Tajikistan towards the Taliban remains the same. No engagement, like I said, and non-recognition, which is a position that's unique in the region. Interestingly, after the series of earthquakes that hit the region of Herat in Afghanistan, Tajikistan has sent humanitarian aid through trucks, so winter clothes, shoes, food, tents, more than 3,000 tons of humanitarian aid in 130 trucks. So there are humanitarian contacts and economic ties between Tajikistan and Afghanistan. Now, the position of Uzbekistan is much clearer. Uzbekistan is willing to engage with the Taliban and has not hidden that. So it's a very pragmatic position. They want to work on connectivity projects with Afghanistan, and they have met Taliban officials. You have here an example of how Uzbekistan is engaging with the Taliban with a picture of a ribbon cutting ceremony to sort of like kick off a railway connectivity project between Afghanistan and Uzbekistan. So the Taliban, and again, I will give that for my two panelists to dig more into. They push for successful and productive relations with neighboring countries. They have, again, a very pragmatic approach. They want to reactivate the projects that were not completed during the previous governments. Last May, they actually declared that they were responsible of maintaining border security and establishing good relations with their neighbors. So that's a very pragmatic approach. And this week, a Taliban delegation was invited in Moscow to the Astrakhan Forum to attract investments, foreign investments into Afghanistan railway projects. So even though they're willing to connect Afghanistan, there's the problem of investments that they're working on. So I drew this map just to give you an idea of the connectivity landscape along Afghanistan northern borders. This map is a work in progress, so don't take it as a final version, but I just want to give a visual idea of what's going on. And you see that there are railroad tracks that are being built or that are considered in order to connect Afghanistan with Central Asia. Interestingly, you see that nothing's going on between Afghanistan and Tajikistan in terms of railway projects, but they are semi-open border crossing points, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. But you see that there are projects to be considered and completed to connect Afghanistan with Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, and to even connect Afghanistan with Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, China, and even to the Caucasus. But again, I think that's something I will leave for the discussion or for my co-panelists. So that all of that is to say that the foreign policy of Afghanistan translates into, well, the Taliban, translates into agreements and possible projects. So there are connectivity considerations, as can be seen on this map. How do these macro projects and ideas materialize along the borders? So here is an example of, well, it's a picture that was taken at the border between Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. This border crossing point is open to traffic, but not to people. So that's very important. So there's trucks and also trains, freight going in and out of Afghanistan from Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan is sending humanitarian aid, petrol products to Afghanistan, and in return, Afghanistan is sending products from Pakistan, from India, even from Thailand, mostly fruits and potatoes, to support the southern parts of Uzbekistan, which need these products because it's not possible to produce them locally. So they are sort of like transit. There is transit going on at this border. It's actually a very active border crossing point in Hayratan, which is on the Uzbekistan part, and Hayratan, which is on the Afghanistan part. Interestingly, when I conducted fieldwork there, people who were responsible of the cross-border connections were saying, in Uzbekistan, that it was easier to work with the Taliban because they ensured security and that there was less corruption, even though they did not say there's no corruption or no security, but they said it was much easier to connect those borderland areas. And for Tashkent, this is very important because it allows Uzbekistan to diversify supply routes and to not only rely on the route from Russia in the context of the war in Ukraine. So this is a very important border crossing point, both for Afghan communities, but also for Uzbekistan. Here is a picture very briefly of the facilities of international organizations at the Terminus Cargo Center, so at the border between Uzbekistan and Afghanistan, and to give you an idea of the type of the amount of humanitarian aid that is sent to Afghanistan. You see here flour from Kazakhstan that is about to go into Afghanistan. Very briefly, because I'm almost running out of time, what's going on at the border between Tajikistan and Afghanistan outside of Badakhshan, so in the area that's less connected, at the Sherhan Bandar border crossing point. Interestingly, again, it's what I call a semi-open, semi-closed border, because people and goods have been able to cross as early as July 2021. So the Taliban were not really in power in the entire country of Afghanistan, but still they were in charge of this border crossing point, and they let people and goods cross. So that was only 3 weeks after they took control of the borderland areas. Afghans who live in Tajikistan can go back to Afghanistan through this border crossing point. And again, just like with Uzbekistan, there's commercial trade relations that we observe. So just as an example, very recently, Tajikistan sent 16 million chicken eggs to Afghanistan in 2022. There are also cement, cotton, building materials, mineral fertilizers going to Afghanistan, and Afghanistan is sending fruits and vegetables to Tajikistan. And like I said, that's the portion that is on the western side of the border, and on the eastern side, it's the border is mostly closed, but it's slowly reopening since early September. To get slowly but eventually to the conclusion, I wanted to bring a sort of like an international relations perspective and mention that it's important to talk about non-state actors when we talk about cross-border connectivity between Central Asia and Afghanistan. You see on this picture that was taken in December 2021 that the two national electricity providers of Tajikistan and Afghanistan, so Barqi Tojik and Dabs, signed an agreement to make sure that Tajikistan would continue supplying Afghanistan with electricity in the north, and this contract was renewed in 2022. I think that's very interesting because there's no official relations between Tajikistan and Afghanistan, yet you see that small-scale actors are ensuring cross-border connectivity. So that's important to give to take that into account because these actors want to make sure that the cross-border relations remain in a context where there's no diplomatic contact. between Tajikistan and Afghanistan. And this is just one example. Like I said, the UN is a non-government actor and is also in charge of cross-border relations between Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. There's, like I said, the Aga Khan Development Network in Badakhshan. So these are examples to say that even though Tajikistan has a very harsh position towards the Taliban, there are still relations between Afghanistan and Tajikistan. So to conclude, what to remember, I think, like Sebastian said, the borders between Afghanistan and Central Asia are the least troubled of all borders of Afghanistan. And I'm sure my co-panelists can talk about the other borders of Afghanistan and the situation there that is more complex. I think when we talk about these borders between Afghanistan and Central Asia, they should be and could be seen as connectivity device. And I think it's important to bring a micro perspective to the more general macro pictures. So again, this multi-scalar analysis is important. However, all of that being said, there are challenges to follow, and that will lead me to the transition with the presentations of my co-panelists. There is this issue of the Khosh-Tepa Canal, which has been everywhere in the news on the region. And again, I will leave that to my co-panelists, but I wanted to say that the Khosh-Tepa Canal is a project involving the Amu Darya River. On the Tajikistan part, there's no agreement between Afghanistan and Tajikistan on the use of the Amu Darya. So what's something to follow is if the Taliban will seize this void, this legal void, to try and open a diplomatic canal with Tajikistan and try to engage on how to share the water. Another issue is the population displacements in Badakhshan. So the Taliban have been appointing non-local governors in Badakhshan and have displaced mainly Pashtun communities to the north, to Badakhshan, which is putting stress on the borderland communities in northern Afghanistan, who already feel under pressure by the Taliban. So that's definitely something to follow. And finally, there have been crossings by armed men from Afghanistan into Tajikistan. Not a lot, so I'd like really to nuance that. Only 9 men managed to cross, and they've all been killed or went back to Afghanistan, which is they're very likely to belong to Jamaat Ansarullah, which is a terrorist organization backed by the Taliban and mostly comprised of Tajikistani citizens. What's interesting here is that it's a group that the Taliban are using to put pressure on Tajikistan. It's a very, very big leverage for the Taliban, and that's something to follow, how the Taliban will probably use this group to put more pressure on Tajikistan and to engage with Tajikistan, and finally have Tajikistan acknowledge that they are the new governors of Afghanistan. That's probably something to follow. I will stop here and thank you very much. And I'm very excited to listen to my co-panelists now.
Mr. Nader Naderi, who is a seasoned leader with 22 years experience, is currently a senior fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Center and a fellow at the Hoover Institution of Stanford University. Nader is also an associate fellow with Kennan Institute, Center for International and European Law. His background spans civil society, the private sector, institution building, government and research, and he's also an advocate for human rights and justice. He has first-hand experience in peacemaking. He participated in UN peace talks for Afghanistan in 2001. And in the 2020 and 21 peace talks between the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan and the Taliban. Nader has served as a commissioner of the Independent Human Rights Commission, as a chairman of the Civil Service Commission, and as senior advisor to the Afghan president on strategic affairs and human rights. And he has published in New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and he has appeared in many other medias, including BBC, CNN, and PBS. So Nader, the floor, thank you for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Melanie, for a wonderful overview, especially based on the field work and direct visit. So what I would try to do to just supplement and add to what Melanie said, as you know, from the 5 Central Asian countries, 3 of them have this direct border connection with Afghanistan. And then you can find in Afghanistan, for each of those countries, both linguistic, religious, and ethnic strong relations. Afghanistan, any of the people from Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, or Turkmenistan to come to Afghanistan, they wouldn't need a translator because they would find people who would speak Uzbeki, who would speak Turkmen, who would speak, of course, Dari Farsi, that the Tajiks are speaking in Tajikistan. But at the same time, there are Kyrgyz in Afghanistan too, and Kazakhs in Afghanistan too. So the further down north of two others. So there is this stronger historical ties between Afghanistan and the Central Asia. It has gone through ups and downs historically. During the pre-Soviet, of course, there was a lot of relation between Bukhara and the rest of Afghanistan and also the entire region. But so during Soviet, and especially when Afghanistan was invaded by the Soviet Union, the relation have gone much more further tied, both educationally, culturally, but also in terms of economic. For example, the Afghan gas pipeline, the only one that took Afghanistan's gas to Central Asia and back distributed to Mazar, to the Balkh province there. Fast forward into 2001 onward. This relation has have been based on a number of geopolitical and geoeconomic interests on both sides. For Central Asia, up on the north, with domination of the Gazprom networks and the Russia, and kind of in their southeast China, with, of course, economic and also geopolitical interest. Most of the Central Asian countries were looking, especially post-independence, toward the south and especially to Afghanistan to get access to global markets. And the investments both in the Caspian Sea, in Uzbekistan, in Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and partially in Tajikistan, but most those others who have had the fossil, the oil and the gas, were very much with the hope of connecting through Afghanistan, and that's unfortunately a dream that never have come through because of the wars and violence in Afghanistan. So now, when we look, at least 4 areas of interest forms the relation between Afghanistan and Central Asia, but especially from Central Asian perspective, some of those are key concerns. So first on security, Melanie spoke about some the Ansarullah vis-a-vis the Tajikistan, which there are elements of Ansarullah now in Badakhshan of Afghanistan. There are training camps there from local information that we have that they are conducting trainings. There were a few rocket launches, both in Uzbekistan and once in Turkmenistan, and also from Afghanistan side to Tajikistan. And that's an increasingly main concern that brings together the contact group that was proposed recently by Mirziyoyev there. However, Tajikistan is not very much yet in favor of expanding that relation. The second, and in addition to Tajikistan, you have the Uzbek Islamist groups that have been there during the first Taliban and during the past 20 years, and currently also is a major part of concern. Apart from security concern, there is the issue of drugs. Melanie talked about it briefly, but the drugs is primarily to Tajikistan. Just last year, over 5 tons of drugs and heroines were seized by Tajikistan security forces, and the same goes toward of the same concern to Uzbekistan too. That route remains a very easy but protected route for drug trafficking from north of Afghanistan to these Central Asian countries. Then the two other main concern, one is an interest, a shared interest, but the concern is the water. Both when Salma Dam was built and inaugurated in Herat province, because Salma Dam goes to Iran, and part of that water, the Salma River water goes to Iran, and from there joins to other rivers that makes the dam that built jointly by, if I'm not mistaken, Uzbekistan and Iran, and that is an effect. So that concern remained there. However, it's less of a legal issue there because that the river is not entirely a transboundary water. It is primarily in Afghanistan, and the dam is being built. But then on Almu, which is one of the main river basin, 5 river basin of Afghanistan, the Khosh-Tepa Canal have created concern, not only of Tajikistan but also Uzbekistan, because the Hamudarya River feeds other branches in all of those countries. Now, the Khosh-Tepa Canal is not something new. It has been, the vision for that has been decades old, but the feasibility study of it was done around 2018 and was completed around 2020. And then the preparation for physical implementation and budgeting began 2021. So the actual digging of the first canal, which is at around 120 kilometers, began 2021, and then suspended because of the security issues, and the Taliban have taken it. So the only institution the Taliban kept operating and the person who is running it remained in charge of it is the national company, which is a national company in a government but independent, that operates. So it's a 200 plus kilometer canal with branches. It created already tensions domestically also because of some of perceptions in terms of planning of allocation of land and replacement of population from one location to another. That remains yet unclear. The Taliban haven't made any clarity about it, but also created this international cross boundary concerns with Central Asian countries. And finally, the issue of economy. There are a number of things. Tajikistan have always needed a route to Pakistan and to the south to get, as an example, meetings that I've been there, President Rahmanov raised it, and they needed, for example, an increased level of cement, because at that time the relation between the neighboring country to their west was not as good as it is now. So they needed another route to bring their goods to Afghanistan. But Afghanistan had to stop Pakistani trucks to transit Afghanistan because we wanted an access to Wagah port crossing to India, and our goods Pakistan would not allow that through that port. So Afghanistan kind of acted similarly to Pakistan, and that crossing was not open for Tajikistan. But there is increasing level, or surprisingly kept the same level, if not increasing level, of trade and transit between Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. With Turkmenistan, an increased level of fuel transport, the Afghan business community are relying even more than Iran, to Turkmenistan to buy petrol and diesel and gas from two ports, from Akhina and also Torgundi that enters Afghanistan, but also an increasing level of fertilization. Agriculture fertilization are imported. With Uzbekistan, there's a wide range of commodities that transit that both transit through Uzbekistan, but also directly between the two countries. As Melanie said, Uzbekistan adopted a very pragmatist approach, but they have already had a relation established late, like the second decade of or post 2010 with the Taliban. Both Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan established that relation with Taliban in the areas where Taliban have taken over of those districts, and it was driven by security concern. And they've already had that longer-term relation with the Taliban, and they were given that assurances. However, an increasing level of low confidence in the ability of the Taliban that would deliver on some of the security concern, especially acting against some of the terrorist groups that are known as terrorists by Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan and Tajikistan. Now, the contact group that was established is also a response to some of these both interests and challenges, especially the security and the water concerns that these countries have. Now, geopolitically and taking in the globalist stage, what you hear from most of people in Central Asia, the policymakers, and I have heard it firsthand too, that they don't see the United States, when the United States was there, so there was an interest that probably Afghanistan will be secured, an opening toward the south will happen, and the relation will strengthen with the United States too, and investment will include. While every survey have suggested the popularity of U.S. in that region was always lower than Russia and China in terms, but there was a very interest to see that grow. With Afghanistan withdrawal, a lot of them now think the U.S. is an opportunistic power. They view that the Central Asia would not rely on any relation that is transactional, that is very limited, not sustained, and is affected by cycle of elections in the United States. And they also, of course, now have no other choice but to look to the to the China also, especially the Belt and Road Initiative, which is a major part of what China is doing there, other investment that they're doing. And Afghanistan and Central Asia is also connected through BRI too, and a mega part of the Xi Jinping's vision for the future of the immediate region. Is also leaving less of an option. So to the north, Russia and what happened with Ukraine is giving more sense of insecurity to the Central Asian. In the east, south, China, and then with an increasing projection of aggressiveness, is also creating discomfortness. And in the south, Afghanistan, and a very unstable and troubled Pakistan too, is creating a much more of a difficult situation, and does not, unfortunately, give a perspective of a smooth, gradual growth there. Something that is needed to increase more is people-to-people relation. With Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, it's a significant amount of people-to-people relation between Afghanistan and those republics. But with Turkmenistan, because of the way that Turkmenistan is managing entry to Turkmenistan, the visas are not always easy. So there, the people-to-people relation is still very, very minimal. I think I have exhausted my time, and I would stop there.
Thank you so much, Nader. So we'll now move to our third speaker, Mr. Barmak Pajwak, who is a senior program officer working on Afghanistan, Central Asia for the prestigious United States Institute of Peace. Previously, Pajwak worked at the United Nations Development Program, where he was a senior international advisor to the Minister of Rural Rehabilitation and Development of the government of Afghanistan. And before that, he was director of program development and faculty with Southwestern University and Global College in Tucson, in Arizona. Barmak has a very long experience, more than 30 years in the design and management of peace building, humanitarian relief, and socio-economic development programs with government, non-governmental organizations, and the United Nations system in Afghanistan, Central and South Asia, and the Great Lakes region of Africa. So thank you very much, Barmak, for being with us. Just one more point. After Barmak's presentation, we will have a Q&A session. So please feel free to send me your questions in the chat box. So Barmak, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sebastian, and the co-panelists and the participants of today's event. I would like to build up on the presentations, on the very interesting presentations of my co-panelists, but focus on some major issues of concerns with regard to the relations between Afghanistan and Central Asia. Historically, I would like to say that Afghanistan has been always part of Central Asia. Only the British Empire's policies in the 18th and 19th centuries, after they colonized the subcontinent of India, changed the geography of the region, and Afghanistan was more of a buffer state and concern of the for the South Asia policymakers than Central Asia. But anyways, the Taliban return to power in Afghanistan has made the Central Asian states, the 5 Central Asian states, very apprehensive about the region's long-term stability and the spillover of effects of Taliban takeover to Central Asia. The Central Asian states are mainly concerned about security, infiltration by violent Islamic groups operating in Afghanistan, narcotic production, drug trafficking, organized crime, and the possibility of a full-blown civil war in Afghanistan that may lead to population displacement and refugee crisis. These are the main concerns that Central Asian states they have with regard to Afghanistan. And while the Central Asian states are worried about the security implications of Taliban takeover, in Afghanistan, they recognize that Taliban rule, and they recognize that the Taliban rule creates an environment that is ripe for extremism. They also realize that Taliban will remain in power for the foreseeable future, and they and the region have to find ways to engage with them. Kazakhstan, from the 5 Central Asian republics, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan have taken more pragmatic approach towards the Taliban in Afghanistan and engaged with them from the onset after what happened in August 2021 in Afghanistan. Only Tajikistan has objected to the Taliban takeover, warning of security threats, and calling for a more inclusive government in Afghanistan. Like the porous, disputed border of Afghanistan in the southeast with Pakistan and the more formal border with Iran in the west, Afghanistan borders with its 3 neighboring states in the north that are Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan were demarcated through a number of treaties and agreements with the Tsarist government in Russia and later with the USSR. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, Afghanistan has not signed any new border-related agreement or treaty with its three northern neighbors that succeeded the Soviet Union as independent states. I believe that as long as the Taliban are willing and able to fight the Islamic State and contain transnational violent extremist groups, especially those with roots in Central Asia, secure their border, and ensure safe passage of goods and trade between Central Asia, between Central and South Asia, the Central Asian states are likely to tolerate living next to them. So with that background, I would like to talk about four major issues that are of interest and concerns for Central Asian republics with regard to Afghanistan. The first issue and the most important issue is the issue of security and counterterrorism. Since their return to power, the Taliban have tried to assure the Central Asian states of full cooperation on security, including assurances that their security won't be threatened from Afghanistan. This is despite the fact, as mentioned by Nader and also Melanie, this is despite the fact that a number of transnational extremist organizations such as the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, and those with roots in Central Asia like the Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan, Islamic Jihad Union, and Jamaat Ansarullah operate in Afghanistan. Though these organizations have become emboldened after the Taliban victory in Afghanistan, the Taliban seems to have kept them in a tight leash, preventing them of conducting any hostile acts against the northern neighbors. Despite a few incidents that we saw in 2021 and then one or two in 2022, it seems that this policy is working for now. But the future remains very uncertain, as there are many triggers and spoilers that may change the status quo and worsen the situation between Central Asia and Afghanistan when it comes to security provisions. The second issue of concern is the issue of narcotics, drug trafficking, and unorganized crime. Central Asia has been a transit route for narcotics produced and processed in Afghanistan to the markets in Russia and Europe. Despite the Taliban's recent ban on opium poppy cultivation, the Central Asian states are increasingly concerned about the destabilizing effects of drug trafficking through their territories and the possible nexus between drug traffickers, violent extremist groups, and the organized crime syndicates. In particular, drug production in northern Afghanistan around the Panj River Valley and drug trafficking through the border between Afghanistan and Tajikistan involves major networks of organized crimes and has had serious adverse effects on the security and the stability of the border provinces of the two countries, including partly could be blamed for the unrest in the Gorno-Badakhshan Autonomous Oblast of Tajikistan last year. The third issue of concern was discussed by Mr. Nadiri and Mr. Sadozai is the transboundary water resources between Afghanistan and Central Asia. Successive Afghan government until 1991 dealt with the former Soviet Union on managing and sharing Amu Darya River. That is the river between Afghanistan and its three neighbors to the north. Yet in the Water Protocol 566 that was developed by the Soviet Ministry of Water Resources, the allocation of Amu Darya River, which is the Oxus River, another name for the Amu Darya River, to four republics. The Protocol 566 was allocating water between the four Soviet republics of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. Afghanistan, as the other side of the other side of the border and outside of the Soviet Union, but Kyrgyzstan, which was a republic of the Soviet Union, was not included in that water allocation treaty that was developed by the Soviet Ministry of Water Resources. But that was during the Soviet Union. But then after the independence, the 5 independent Central Asian republics maintained the quotas that was assigned to them by the Protocol 566, but again agreed on to establish an interstate commission on the allocation of water from Amudarya and other water resources among themselves. But again, they didn't involve Afghanistan. And as I said before, Afghanistan didn't enter to any new agreement on water sharing, transboundary water sharing, in this case, Amudarya water with its northern neighbors. So there's no treaty between them to this date. Now that global warming and climate change is becoming a major issue of concern in Central Asia, and the Taliban government in Afghanistan has resumed work on Kushtepa Canal to divert water for agricultural development from Amudarya to some provinces in Afghanistan, the riparian states of Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and to some extent Kazakhstan are concerned about their share of water and would like to ensure that their share of water is not diverted by the Taliban through the canal. But in line with their pragmatic approach, as Melanie was referring to it, and also Mr. Nadiri, towards Afghanistan, both Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan have been talking bilaterally through quiet diplomacy with the Taliban authorities in Afghanistan on the matter. We have heard from our colleagues in Uzbekistan and other Central Asian states that the international sanctions and the lack of recognition of the Taliban government makes it very difficult for them to engage in public diplomacy with Taliban, even on issues like the transboundary water resources and the Kushtepa. And again, as Mr. Nadiri was saying, that for the background, because this has been missing from the discussions on the canal, that the project was initially designed prior to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1978. It was designed by the then Afghan Republic government in the 70s, and the actual work on the canal, but this was delayed due to war and conflict, but the actual work was started in 2020 and 2021 by the US-backed government of Afghanistan before Taliban. The fourth issue of concern in relation between Central Asian republics and Afghanistan, which is also a very important issue, especially from a Central Asian perspective nowadays in the changing global geopolitical changes in the changing context of politics and geography in that region, is the trade and transit. Central Asia is landlocked. Most of them, Uzbekistan, for instance, is a double landlocked country. They have to get to have ways for trade and transit to the outside world. But in the aftermath of the US withdrawal from Afghanistan and the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the changing geopolitical context of Central Asia, the return of the Taliban to Afghanistan and the Russian invasion of Ukraine had economic and security implications for Central Asia. While the Taliban takeover in Afghanistan presents many serious challenges, it offers some opportunities to Central Asia, because after some 45 years, there are some elements of relative peace and stability in the country, at least. Though there's no ways or means of any kind of economic development at the current stage, but there's at least peace and stability in the country, or security and stability not peace. And while the Western sanctions on Russia makes it very difficult for Central Asian states to use their traditional routes of trade and transit through Russia, now they have to find ways. And for that reason, countries like Uzbekistan are really trying to focus on building up this trans-Afghan railway network that connects the border, the city of Termez in Uzbekistan to Kabul, and then on to the Pakistani railway network and on to the border cities of Gwadar and Karachi. That is the aim, and that's the objective for Uzbekistan, to expand its trade and transit through South Asia. But again, the question of finances and investment is a big issue. And as we saw with the TAPI project, which is the gas pipeline from Turkmenistan through Afghanistan to Pakistan and India, that was conceived some 30 years ago, but because of security and also because of lack of investment, hasn't been able to move very much forward. The same with CASA 1000, which was very promising in some 10 years ago, because of international investment that is bringing electricity from Tajikistan through Afghanistan to South Asia. This trans-Afghan railway network, which is initiated by Uzbekistan in cooperation with Afghanistan and Pakistan, it still doesn't have finances, and I don't know what will be the future of it, but it is very, very important. That kind of trade and transit route through Afghanistan to South Asia and on to the world is very important, vital for Central Asia's economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barmak. So we have about 15 minutes for discussions, and I received, of course, several questions. First one is maybe to come back on the Koch-Tepe Canal project, and the question is, how would you assess the prospects for conflicts between the two sides regarding the division of these water resources, and if you see such a prospect of war or of conflict, then what forms that would take?
Who do you want it to respond?
You can go ahead if you want.
Listening to the conversation of the last meeting of the contact group, as was proposed by the Uzbekistan president, you could see this is one of the key tension. Mirziyoyev in the leadership meetings of like the presidential level meeting raised it, but also the special envoys too. So there is certainly a point for tension. However, taking international law and transboundaries, that on the Amu River, it does apply and regulates situations like that. There have been studies of legal aspects of it. However, at this stage, because Afghanistan started the canal starts not anywhere from the location where the water becomes transboundary, the river. It starts from way ahead in areas that are completely within Afghanistan, and therefore legally it has the possibility of managing the water, but not in a way that would undermine international transboundary water laws that would affect both the environment and other access to water to these countries. I've seen documents. One question is about the sources of information about that. In the chat, one of the colleagues are asking. So there are a number of Afghan documents, both in terms of, as Mr. Barmak said, of a longer term envision or the vision for the Koch-Tepe Canal that was there, published in government cabinet meetings, but especially and particularly the High Council for a water management, which was a sub-council of economic council under the previous Republican government, have adopted, approved the plan, adopted the budget for it. The cabinet, the Afghan government's cabinet documents that adopted, that approved budget for both the feasibility study and design of the canal, and then the start of the project. Mr. Atash, who is the national head of the National Development Company, and his office, on the website there was already some of those documents from that time. I haven't checked recently if they have brought it down, but he begin the actual construction. The company started the actual construction in 2021. So most of the documents are the Afghan government documents, the cabinet adoption, the High Council of Economic, and the Water Management Council too. I will look if any of those are in English, and I would send probably later in the group chat. But the potential, if the Central Asians see that as a complete control of the water, then certainly it becomes potential for further tensions. But a dialogue would be the best way to move forward with that before coming to any prejudgment on how this will end up.
Thank you, Nader. Melanie, Barmak, do you want to add anything on that?
Well, I think, yeah, thank you very much. I very much agree with what Mr. Nadi was saying, but I still believe that there's plenty of room for diplomacy and for talks between them. As I said, both Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, that are the riparian states that will be affected by the diversion of water from Amudarya. They have taken very pragmatic approaches towards the Taliban. They are engaged in bilateral discussions with the Taliban, and none of those countries, they aim to go for an open conflict with Afghanistan or with any of their neighbors. They would like to solve this as peacefully as possible. So I don't think that there is any possibility for any kind of armed conflict between those countries. And there are, as Mr. Nadi was saying, there are international laws and regulations that also govern the issues of transboundary water resources. So even they haven't taken that to that kind of an international forum yet. So they are talking with each other to solve this problem, and I hope that they succeed. Thank you.
No, I completely agree to what Nader and Barmak said. Also, I think the Taliban committed to using less than 20% of the canal, from what I understand. So, like, you know, I think we tend to be very much influenced by the Central Asian perspective and the fact that, you know, Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan are really concerned. And so it's important to also look at what the Taliban tend to do, and also the limits, because I think, like my co-panelist said, you know, there's the issue of funding the project. They haven't secured, from what I understand, the entire budget for that. They need also the specialists, the experts. So, like, these are like very technical things that we should take into account. That it's tomorrow is not the day when this project will be completed. There are steps also to follow, and like my co-panelist said, no one is interested in a conflict over that, neither the Taliban or the Central Asian government. So yeah, I totally second with my co-panelists.
Just one additional point onto it. While, as Melanie said, the amount of water that will be used is minimal, there is a lot of good studies that my former hat, the Afghanistan Research and Evaluation Unit, have carried out on that river basin and the other mechanisms for the use of water on the Afghan side. Do not forget that the areas that this water will be irrigating, and as it's designed, are changing the environment in a good way. It will elevate poverty. It would at the same time not impact the downstream of and those who are at the downstream of the water, especially Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. And the dialogue is the main way to move forward. The budget that's so far been used to complete the 100+ kilometers of it was already budgeted and was allocated to the account of the National Development Company in 2021, before the collapse. So the Taliban preserved that because that's something that they thought will give them a boost in terms of their public image, and so far they haven't secured, as Melanie said, the rest of the expansion, because it's all sub canals, the allocation of land and other control doors and other water management elements that are required. One mistake that they have done, because they speeded up the canal, they could not create a kind of a proper isolation on the bed of the canal. A lot of water sank down or evaporated. So that's a technical engineering issue that they've realized now, and that requires a lot of more budget. They can't secure budget unless the legal aspects of it is sorted. The World Bank or any development bank or investors wouldn't provide that.
Thank you, Nader. So, I mean, we don't have so much time left, but I would like to ask at least 2 questions. I'm trying to combine the questions I received. So there are several questions about how local populations in Central Asian countries, especially in the border areas, perceive the Taliban and their policies, and more generally the situation in Afghanistan. So are there any surveys on this? And for example, Melanie, you came back from a field trip, so I was wondering in your interviews, if you talked about that. I mean, you can answer, but of course, Barmak and Nader, who have a very big field experience there, are welcome to answer. And another question, again, on how local populations and Central Asian countries view Afghanistan. Are Central Asian countries concerned about how women are treated in Afghanistan?
Yeah, thank you. Very briefly. So on the matter of women, the most vocal country is Tajikistan. That's what we see in the official speeches of Tajikistani officials. They are pushing for more rights for women in Afghanistan. That's the official narrative of Tajikistan. So they want this inclusive government, of course, but added to that, they want women to have access to education and jobs, and to be just emancipated. So that's the one thing I wanted to say about women rights in Afghanistan from the Central Asian perspective. I don't think the other ones are very vocal about that, because, like we said, they're much more pragmatic. So that's the goal, is not to change domestic policy in Afghanistan, but to engage with the Taliban for their own interests. And on the perspective of borderland communities, yeah, so it's interesting because Afghanistan, the Taliban are seen as a problem that's on the other side of the border. So what I found out in my interviews was that, and that sort of like builds on what Nader said. The same communities, there are linguistic and religious ties on both sides of these borders, right? So there is sort of like kinship. So especially in Tajikistan, where people think of Afghans on the other side as being the same people because of their religious, linguistic features. So they feel sad about what's going on in Afghanistan. They feel sad for Afghans because they feel that they're undergoing political decisions. And interestingly, they don't think that the Taliban are going to come to Afghanistan, to Central Asia, to Tajikistan. They think it's really an Afghan problem. So people who live in the villages along the borders are not afraid of what's going on in Afghanistan for their own security. They feel very safe on their side because they know that the Taliban don't have any goal to sort of like invade Tajikistan. And another thing is that they think that Afghans are more conservative. So they're more conservative, poor. So these are like the most shared opinions about Afghanistan and Afghans. And again, they're not afraid of the Taliban coming into Central Asia. They think the border is really sort of like stopping them from going, and they know that it's not the goal of the Taliban.
Thank you. Nader, Barmak, anything to add on? Yeah, Barmak,
just while I agree with Malini and what she said about that, but I think that all 5 Central Asian republics, they are concerned about the treatment of women in Afghanistan. Both governments and also the people of Central Asia, they are concerned about that. They have a genuine concern about the ideology of Talibanization and Islamization of Afghanistan. They are secular states constitutionally, they're constitutional states, and they are very concerned about it. They are very firm in terms of separating religion from state, and the governments and are concerned about the wave of extremism coming from their southern borders to Central Asia through Taliban government in Afghanistan or through Taliban proxies. So that is a genuine concern that they have. But that on women issues, we have heard it from our civil society organizations, from government officials, that they are concerned about the issue. But those who know Central Asia, that they know also and appreciate and understand that the issues of rights is not a major priority for the foreign policy of those states. So, thank you.
Thank you, Barmak.
Yep.
Nader, you want to add anything?
Just quickly the concern in terms of security is finding its root, because primarily this mentality and a rise into this confidence of some of those who are radical but are inside these countries, and they've seen the Taliban and that they're taking a model from them, and that's why there are concerns. One quick point, there was a question about China, and that I will be so quick to refer to a document just on 24th of October, a document the Chinese government released on the outlook on China's foreign policy on its neighborhood in the new era. It talks about a dysfunctional global governance and how risks are high, and therefore encourages everybody in the region to look for something regional solution. So that's I would refer to that document to see China's look into the region.
Yeah, no, thank you, Nader. Actually, I was about to ask this question because we had several questions. I received several questions on the influence of foreign stakeholders. So indeed, what is the role of China? So you already answered, but if Melanie and Barmak want to elaborate on that, they are very welcome. Any insights from what China does inside Afghanistan, beyond, of course, the BRI and the projects they fund, the security aspects, and so on. And another question I received are regional organizations such as the SCO, so the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, contributing to stability and cooperation in the region. I mean, the changing dynamics of the Taliban era, and if yes, how? So this will be the last question. I'm sorry, we'll have to conclude after that.
Yeah, very briefly on China. I will leave the rest for my co-panelists. There's definitely a link between the BRI and China trying to influence the Taliban's sort of like approach to them, especially to the terror organizations comprised of Uyghur fighters. The interest of China is to avoid having those fighters cross into Tajikistan, especially in Tajikistan, and put in danger all the infrastructure reconstruction that China is funding. So the biggest infrastructure that China is funding in Badakhshan of Tajikistan is the main road that connects Dushanbe to the province of Badakhshan. China has been spending millions of dollars on that, and that's part of the BRI, and that's a road that will eventually connect better the territory of the the Xinjiang territory in China to Tajikistan and so Central Asia, and so they have no interest in having those terror groups or what they consider terror groups stepping in Tajikistan and putting these efforts into danger. And so, but I think my co-panelists can probably complete that. But from what I understood, China has put so much pressure that the Taliban have displaced those Uyghur fighters southward. So they used to be in the north of Afghanistan, and they have sort of like kicked them out further south under Chinese pressure.
Just
Thank
briefly,
you. Please go ahead, Barmak. And if you have any other comment before we conclude, please do.
I'm going to be very brief. I think there are a lot of noise about China's investments in Afghanistan. There are some security cooperations that they have, as Melanie was saying, because of their concern to the presence of Uyghur liberation movement or East Turkestan liberation movement in Afghanistan. But otherwise, China's, even in the early days of 2000, they have a policy of coming and signing a contract for a mine, like they did it for the copper mine in Ainak in south of Kabul, which is one of the biggest copper mines in the world, to sign the contract and take the right of exploration and then go and vanish. They never worked. The same way they have come and signed several contracts in Afghanistan with the Taliban authorities, but they haven't started any work on those mines or those projects. So it is just they are taking care of the paperwork right now, but God knows when the actual investment and work will start. Thank you.
Thank you, Barmak. Nader, do you want to say one final word before we conclude?
Yeah, for China, we should remember that China has solved or doesn't have any border issues or unsolved problems with all of these neighbors, except with India. But on the land side, they have none of those. So they basically attaches great importance to neighborhood diplomacy, and always they say they prioritize the regional stability, peace, and prosperity. Something that also is important, that they have signed cooperation, friendly cooperation agreements with all Central Asian countries, including Afghanistan, and they are building on the very gradual, slow process of formalizing, regulating most of those initiatives, and the importance on one road, one built is so much to them.
Thank you very much, Nader. I mean, I'm sorry we're late. We need to conclude. So I would like to thank you all for your presentation, for your valuable insights, especially on a topic on which, well, we don't know so much and on which it's not necessarily very easy to work on. So I would also like to thank the audience for the questions, for the discussion. Thank you again to the Kennan Institute for your support to organize this event. It has been a real pleasure to work with you, and we look forward to having you again in our upcoming Central Asia Program seminar. So thank you. Have a nice day or have a nice evening. Goodbye.